Hello and welcome to an exciting episode on Der Mensch with Bodo and Guest, the human being with Bodo and Guest today. It is our very first episode entirely in English and our 15th live stream so far. We will make sure to translate it into German later on for our German public. But even more so, I find it an exciting episode because we are finally welcoming David Icke on this show. I've been in touch with David Icke since June 2022, since we started this show together with Bodo, and now it has finally come to the day that we are welcoming David Icke in our virtual studio. I've listened to this interview already, and I would really like to encourage everyone out there listening to this interview, really send this interview around, send it to friends and family, send it to everyone who you think is starting to feel just like you might start to feel like, that there's more to our physical body, that there's more to our human existence and more to this physical world than we were meant to believe. David Icke has researched everything he says in this interview over the course of the past couple of decades, and he has found them to be true, which gives all of us a very good reason to really open our minds and really take in what he has to say. And even though you might not agree upon everything that he says, or you might not believe it right away, I really encourage you to have an open mind and really just listen to it. In the end, just something might stick to you and might transform the way you view yourself, you view this world, which I find a very valuable experience. Now, without further ado, welcome David Icke in our virtual studio, and welcome Bodo. Thank you for making this interview possible.
Hello, good morning, and have a warm welcome to Der Mensch, the series of people, the man behind the celebrity, the human behind the celebrity. And maybe you're a little bit wondering why I'm speaking English today. This is why I have a special guest, and the special guest asked me, please don't take in any breaks for making a translation or something like that. Just let us talk from person to person, and then it's not interrupted. And I will translate this afterwards for you. You will have the chance to watch both videos on this show, the original one in English and the other one. And now my guest, and I'm very happy and I'm very proud to welcome one of the well-known or best-known conspiracy theorists in the world, and maybe one of the first. And I'm a late starter, so my experience is only 3 years, but here is somebody who can tell us more. But we don't want to talk much about conspiracy theories. We want to talk about David Icke. Hello, David.
Hello, thanks for asking me on.
Yes, it's a funny thing. I just told you before this speech that I saw you the first time when you did a speech on Trafalgar Square about this clever virus which has come 2022 to the people, and you realized that it has a lot of interesting things like a watch. It knows when it's active, and he knows what's the right distance and how high you are so that it can spread. So this was the first time I ever heard of you. And maybe, especially in Germany, there are a few people who don't know you. So the first question is, who are you?
Yeah, well, good question. In the totality of my I'm the same as you are. I'm an expression of consciousness, having a human experience, a brief one. And when you get to 70, like me, you realize how brief it is. But in terms of the human personality they call David Icke, I was born in Leicester in the English East Midlands in 1952. We came from a very, kind of poor background, living in a council house, rented it off the council. And I grew up in an atmosphere with not much money, but it was a time when there was no computers, there were no smartphones, none of those things. And you had to make your own fun, your own entertainment. And it was a very different world. And that is important in terms of my life as it's gone. Because if you're born into a world where things are as they are now, then you tend, obviously, why wouldn't you, to believe that this is how the world is, because that's all you've ever known. You've been born into it. But when you were born in 1952 and you saw a very different world, still controlled by the same forces, but not to the extent that it is now, you can see the extraordinary level of change and focus of control that that has unfolded, not least in the last 20 years, the last 10 years, the last 5 years, and absolute in the last 2.5, 3. And I always wanted to be a professional footballer from a very young age. I started out, funny enough, you won't believe it now, but I started out as a very diffident little boy. I came from a what they call a working class background. And basically, you were going to end up in a factory or you're going to end up in an office somewhere. And you were not supposed to think very, very, very big about what you were going to do with your life, because that happened to other people. And I took that on for a while. And then I started becoming good at football. I was a goalkeeper. And my confidence started, as a person, started to gather and gather and gather. And I thought, well, hold on a minute. Why can't I do something with my life? Why do I have to be in this straitjacket of you're working class, so this is what you do? And so I grew up during the 60s when there was a lot of this kind of awakening of the working classes to the fact that maybe they're worth more than they're told they are. And I became a professional footballer, and that finished with arthritis when I was 21. And I'd always been interested in journalism. I'd always read lots of newspapers when I was quite small. And so I became a journalist, and newspaper journalist, radio journalist, television journalist with the BBC. And then I started getting involved in green politics, not the kind of green politics we have now, but that which truly cared about the environment in all its different aspects. And I became a national spokesman for the British Green Party in the 1980s. But I could see that the Green Party was the traditional politics claiming to be different, and was just a different color rosette on the same system. So I left that. And then during 1989, when I was working with the Green Party, and I was still a national television presenter with the BBC, some very strange things started happening to me. In early 1989, I started feeling a presence around me. It was kind of quite mild to start with. It was just that I just feel I'm in an empty room, but it doesn't feel like it's empty. You know? And this went on through 1989, getting more and more tangible and stronger, until March 1990, when I was working for the BBC and I was in a hotel room called the Kensington Hilton Hotel near the television centre of the BBC. And I sat down on the side of the bed alone, apparently, and this presence was so tangible by then that I said out into the room, if there's someone there, would you please contact me, because you're driving me up the wall. And literally a few days later, I'm down the seafront in the place where I live on the Isle of Wight off the south coast of England. And I was with my son, Gareth, who's a little boy then. He's working at Iconic with me now, just down the corridor. And I was stopped on the seafront by a railway worker who wanted to talk about football, because I was a sports presenter with the BBC. And when the conversation was finished, I couldn't see Gareth, but I knew where he would be. He was in the news shop on the seafront reading some steam train books. We like steam trains. And I went into the entrance to the shop, and here he is with a book. And I said, come on, Gaz, we'll go up the town and get some lunch. And at that point, something strange happened. The atmosphere around me changed. I had no idea what it was. I mean, I can see now it was a change in the electromagnetic field. My feet started to burn, and it was like magnets were pulling them to the ground. And I heard this, not a voice, it was a thought form, a very strong thought form go through my head, saying that I should go and see the books on the far side. Go and look at the books on the far side. And I knew this new shop very well. It's a tourist shop. It sold newspapers, sold a few books, but the kind of books it sold were like romantic novels for the tourists to read in the deck chairs on the beach. So I'm first of all bewildered by what's happening to me. And second, I'm bewildered because I know what the books are like on the far side. But I did go over there in a very bewildered state. And in among the romantic novels was this one book called Mind to Mind. And because it was different, I picked it up and turned it over and I read the blurb and I saw the word psychic. And it was a biography, basically, by a professional psychic. And the word psychic hit me immediately because I thought, I wonder if this lady would pick up what the heck's been going on around me for the last year. So I read it in 24 hours and I contacted her and I went to see her. I did tell her what was happening to me. I had arthritis with which finished my football career. And I just said to her, maybe your hands-on kind of healing, like Reiki healing would help. But my real reason for going was, would she pick what's going up around me, pick up it, what was happening. So I went to see her. I saw her a couple of times and had a nice chat, very interesting. And the third time I went, I'm sitting on this bench, this medical type bench in her front room, not far from Brighton on the south coast here. And she's doing sort of the healing on my left knee. And suddenly I felt like a spider's web on my face. And I thought immediately, that's what she said in her book, because she said in the book that sometimes when other realities are trying to lock into you, you sometimes feel like a spider's web on your face. So that's, again, an electromagnetic field. And I said nothing to her. I'm just thinking, whoa, what's going on here? And then she said 10, 15 seconds later, oh, my goodness, this is powerful. I've got to close my eyes for this one. And she starts telling me that this figure in her mind, a projection, obviously, was telling her that I was going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets. This is March 1990. That one man cannot change the world, but one man can communicate the message that can change the world. And that I was going to be led to knowledge, and from that point, and at other times, knowledge will be put straight into my mind, and many, many other things that I detail in a book called Truth Vibrations, which came out in 1991. And I left again in a bewildered state. What's going on here? And I was going off to the BBC after that to present a sports program. Well, all I can say is from that moment, exactly that started to happen. I started synchronistically, coincidentally walking into knowledge, personal experience, people, documents, books, whatever, that were painting a picture, a very clear picture. It was like someone handing puzzle pieces in a jigsaw puzzle in pretty much the right order to understand where they go. And it's just built up, and it's been going on now for coming up 33 years. And it's taken the same theme. I just keep walking into information. And what would happen, what has happened, is that a new subject would come into my life, and suddenly information about that subject is coming from all directions. And so this has allowed me to build up this massive picture of deep in the rabbit hole, going deeper all the time, of what's actually happening in the world compared with what we're told is happening. And the understanding that if a few are going to control the many, they have to control the perception of the many, because from perception comes behavior. And human society, what it is and what it isn't, if it's nice or it's not, is simply the sum total of human behavior, which is the sum total of human perception. So that's the stadium in which this whole global conspiracy, as I would call it, is played out. It's played out in the human mind. And so you have the hysterical levels of censorship now, which are very simple. And we saw in the COVID era the level of of censorship that went on so that only one narrative would be heard by most people. And the reason for that is that where does perception come from? Which leads to behavior. It comes from information we receive and process, whether it's a personal experience, a post on Facebook, or an announcement by Anthony Fauci. We get our perceptions from the information we receive. So if you want to control perception, then you have to control as best you can the information that people receive. And that's why people like me are banished. I mean, I've just heard your experience. You definitely will understand what I'm saying. And this is why I've just been banned from 26 European countries for the crime of being asked to go to the Netherlands and speak at a peace rally for half an hour in November. And the government of the Netherlands not only banned me from the Netherlands for 2 years, but from the whole Schengen border group. And as a result of that, what they call the Schengen information system, I'm also pretty much banned from most of the rest of the Western world, because they take, including America, the Schengen information system criteria for whether they'll let you in or not. And I was banned in Australia, from Australia, in 2019 as well. So you can see why people are being silenced when they're putting out a different narrative to the mainstream, because they don't want people to have another point of reference in terms of information that might get them to think and see the world and themselves in ways that are different to the official narrative. And so that's what I do now. I research information, I put out information, and you've got to get very creative often to find ways of doing that now.
If anybody in Germany is interested in the life of David Icke, there is a new film, and this film is called Renegade, and you can find it anywhere on the web. And it's very interesting because he's leading through this film, and he's showing you the places where he lives, where he has grown up. So just to give a basement to the things he already told us. But you told us that the perception in the time when you were a kid was different. So you said it's a very different world, no cell phone and things. Do you want to go back?
Well, I want to go back. See, I'm not against technology that serves humanity. I'm against technology that enslaves humanity. And just like a microphone, you can use it for good or ill. And so you can use artificial intelligence and various technologies to help the spinal injured and to help people who have various ailments. And of course, that's a good thing. And if that's where it ended, then you wouldn't hear a problem with me. If someone can overcome a real health disability by the use of technology, well, okay, that's good. But that's not what it's used for. It's often what it's the excuse for it is made, that it's going to do this, it's going to do that. But really, it's about control. And, you know, it's, in the end, this whole conspiracy is leading to a place where artificial intelligence does the thinking of what is now the human mind. Up to this point, they have had to manipulate information, to manipulate perception, to manipulate behavior. But where they want to go, and they're openly talking about it now, that they've gone from hiding it to telling you it's a good thing, because they can't hide it anymore, because they're getting very close to imposing it. But the idea is that artificial intelligence will directly become the human mind. I mean, Ray Kurzweil at Google, this futurist guy who's been talking about all this stuff for a long time, is saying that by the year 2030, which is a massive year in terms of a focus of many things by this, what I call global cult. It's by 2030, he says that they'll be connecting the human brain to artificial intelligence. And in his words, once that happens, AI will do more and more of human thinking until human thinking is basically negligible. And that's where they want to go, full-blown control of human perception, thus human behavior. And so the technologies are often given a nice reason for being, but that's not the real reason for them being introduced. It's like the smartphone, okay, it's about being able to communicate. And in some ways, you can see why people will go with that. And I mean, you know, the world has gone with that. But it's also created a digital world in which people are a piece of cake to surveil and track. Not only track where they are, but track what they're saying, what they believe, and who they're communicating with. And so we've entered this QR world where we've seen the extremes of it in China, where you can't move anywhere unless you have the right ticks on the QR code. And what they're using the quote COVID card to introduce is the so-called vaccine passport. And the vaccine passport is just a QR code, very much comparable with what's happening in China. And so, and now they're moving, as I said they would, to digital money, to a one world digital currency, with the end of cash, the end of the use of cash, which they've also used, quote, COVID, to remove in great swathes since 2020 in the use of cash.
May I interrupt you? Because this, what you are telling me, is right. Most of the people who are watching my channel are aware also of this. The question is behind this. The man, David Icke, he has maybe some solutions for us because we already know the problems. Thanks to you and other guys who have brought up this whole thing. And I would make a recommendation. I have read the book, how's it called? It was Perceptions of a Renegade Mind in English. So I read it in German, to be honest, but it's very nice. Also interesting figures, pictures where you can follow this line. But imagine, David, you will succeed. Everybody is able to listen to you. Nobody will ban you from anywhere, and every country is inviting you because we want to make a new restart. How can we stop this to happen again? Just imagine both of us are successful and the people are realizing this, and we're putting all these this Club of Rome and how they are all called there where they belong to go. And what are we doing then? What is the way out to prevent to happen again 1984 like we have it now?
Well, in the end, everything comes down to consciousness, your state of consciousness, which is your state of perception. And the perceptions that have got us into this mess are those that believe what authority tells them without question and just acts upon what they're told to believe. And in so many ways, what happened in these COVID years is a focus of what's been happening all along. See, what's happening now is nothing new. It's just more extreme and thus more obvious. And so COVID happened in the way that it did because of two groups of people. One group just believes what authority tells it without question and acts upon it. And then there's another group that doesn't want to do what authority tells it to do, but does it because it's frightened of not doing it. And those two groups, those two mentalities, have been responsible for every tyranny in human history. Because, you know, tyranny is not imposed by tyrants. There's never enough of them. It's imposed by people acquiescing to tyrants through either unquestioning belief in what they tell them or fear of doing something different to what they're told to do. And the third group is the renegade group. And they're the people that have the mentality of, I can see what's going on and I'm not cooperating with it. I'm not doing what you tell me to do. And that's the group that's ended every tyranny in history. And it's, again, nothing new in this sense. If you look through human history, known human history anyway, you'll see the same theme. The few have always controlled the many. It's always been the same. Why? Because of these two groups, these two mentalities have done what they're told, or done what they're told reluctantly, but done it anyway because they're frightened of not doing it. And what's ended every tyranny in history is the third group that has said, we're not having it. We're not doing it anymore. We're not cooperating with our own enslavement anymore. And it's just the same now. It's just more extreme and very much more now urgent. And, you know, people say, what's the solution? I've never been interested in solutions, because solutions invariably lead to more problems, which require more solutions. For me, what I'm looking for is the cause of the problem. And because if you remove the cause, the problem must disappear because its cause is gone. And the cause of the problem throughout human history and absolutely present day is these first two groups that acquiesce through unquestioning obedience or acquiesce through fear of not acquiescing. Take those groups away. Take those groups away throughout known human history, and the few would not have controlled the many on the scale they have. Because it's very easy to just say this global cult, as I call it, is responsible for what's happening in the world. Now, on one level, it is, because it's driving the world in a particular direction of total global control. But it's only possible because the population in enough numbers acquiesce to what it's telling them, either through unquestioning obedience or fear. So if people say, what's the solution? I say, well, find a mirror, because then you're looking at it. And if people think, you see, this is the thing about politics. Politics, I've written in my books over the years about the savior mentality, where people say, come and save me, some force, some person, come and save me. And politicians are part of the savior mentality, in the sense that people are looking around for a political party or a political solution to the situation they don't like. Again and again, I see people who see some of what's happening in the world and how it's absolutely not to be tolerated. And that their reaction is, we need to start a new political party. Well, you go and do that, and you're going to waste your time. You might get some information out if you get one or two people elected and they make a speech in Parliament or something. But the system is going to crush you because you're joining the system. The answer is not to look to a savior politician or a savior anybody. It's to come together in enough numbers and say, we're not doing it. If someone comes out of the Dutch Parliament, the German Parliament, the British Parliament, Capitol Hill, White House, and says, we've had a meeting and this is what's going to happen, if enough members of the population say we're not doing that, it's unenforceable. And people, I think, need to grasp that they're not just little me, someone who has no power. The power that they think authority has, thus they acquiesce to it, is merely the power the population give to authority. If you look at the numbers, 8 billion people in the world, how many compared with that are actually in full knowledge driving this agenda that's taking the world in this direction. A tiny fraction of the 8 billion. Same in every country. The number of people driving the direction of that country will be a fraction of the population of that country. So if you look at the mathematics alone, it's ridiculous that the few can control the many. And it's the first two groups that allow that to happen. And so the solution is to remove the cause of the problem, which is acquiescence to authority, unquestioning and through fear. Because then when you resist that acquiescence, you start to realize where the real power lies. And it's never been with authority. You know, Anthony Fauci can say what he likes during the COVID era, but it's the population that do what he says that make it happen. And this is what people need to do. And, you know, they need to just realize that group that doesn't want to do it, but does it through fear of not doing it, that what's coming if we allow this to happen is, in terms of consequences, vastly more extreme than standing up to it now and saying we're not doing it, we're not having it. Next time they have a lockdown, we're not doing it. Next time they say close your business, we're not doing it in large numbers, and it becomes unenforceable. And that's why they have to work so hard to divide and rule the population, because a united population in knowledge of where the threat's really coming from to all of us are undefeatable. So they have to divide and rule the population by dividing us on religion, race, political persuasion, income bracket, sexuality, all of it. To
like you
say, instead of seeing where the enemy is.
Yeah, this is divide et impera, like you find it in Latin. So you have to make small parts of people that you can control easier. I have to totally admit to you, because I started two political parties in 2022, and I found out really fast that this is not the way you can change anything. And so this is one of the things I agree. But come back to the thing you said, you don't need a savior. You have heard in this bookshop in the Isle of Wight, you told about a presence which was talking to you, and in the hotel room of the Hilton near the BBC studio also there was a presence which was talking to you. Which kind of presence gave you information? Is it God? Who is God? Are you a believer in God?
Well, it depends what you call God. I mean, people have different perceptions of that word. I don't use the word God. I use terms like the all that is, because my life since that awakening, if you like, has taken me, and this is very, very important, it's taken me not only down the road of coming across incredibly synchronistically information about how the world's controlled and where the world's being taken. Absolutely alongside that, simultaneously with that, has been information about the nature of reality, the nature of the true I, and the nature of what we're part of. Because, you know, so much of the alternative media does concentrate on the conspiracy, and so do I. But you're not going to find a solution to the conspiracy within the world of the five senses. You're not. You're going to find it out there with an expansion of consciousness that allows you to see things that the five senses won't see. The five senses, if you look at the way they decode reality, they see everything as apart from everything else. Because again, if you look at education, you look at media, whatever, there's such a extraordinary lack of focus upon the big questions. Who are we? Where are we? What is this place? These things are almost never asked, and yet they should be surely the first questions you ask. Okay, I'm here, but what's here? Where is here? What is here? What's the nature of here? But they're never asked. And I've been asking those questions all my life, and I really started asking them after this awakening. And you start to realize that actually what we call the I is what I refer to in the books as a phantom self. The phantom self that's founded on the perceptions of the five senses. Can I see it, touch it, taste it, hear it, etc.? Then it must exist. And if I can't, then it doesn't. And funnily enough, even though you've got quantum physics and others at the cutting edge of science, in a science exploration of reality, the vast center, the vast overwhelming part of science, what we call science, still focuses on the fact that this world is all there is. And when you look at through your eyes, you're seeing everything there is to see in the space you're looking at. You're not. What we call the human world is just a tiny band of frequency. And it's a very short experience within that band of frequency. And what you have to do if you're going to control billions of people, you have to get them to self-identify themselves, the I, with the labels of a human life. Because once you start saying the I, in all its forms, the I is my race, my religion, my sexuality, my income bracket, and so on, then my sexuality, you are locking people in to limitation, to I can't, it's not possible. Because the five senses are only perceiving one part of this tiny band of frequency we call the human world. And what the idea of the conspiracy is to lock people's sense of attention and reality into that tiny realm of the five senses. And if I look around this room, I see a wall, a door, lights, computers, and I see empty space between them. And so everything to the five senses is apart from everything else. Nothing's connected. And this is fundamental, because it means that I'm not connected to you and I'm not connected to someone else. And when actually between everything that the five senses can see, which is a tiny band of frequency that relates to the frequency of what we call form, so we're seeing form, but we're seeing empty space between the form, actually that space is not empty, it's full of energy, information, consciousness that actually connects us all as one. But you've got to expand your awareness out of the five senses and the prison cell of the five senses to realize that. Otherwise, that will never occur to you. And so the idea is to manipulate us from cradle to grave to perceive the I, who we are, with the labels of a human life. And what you're seeing now, and it's not by accident, it's by design, because this cult knows how this works, just doesn't want us to know. You're seeing the subdividing now of the previous human labels. So now that you've got this long list of letters getting ever longer, LGBTQ, and on and on and on it goes. I mean, some of the definitions of the person, the I, in American universities is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the letters go on forever. And so now we've got people self-identifying who they are, the I, with their sexuality or their race or their culture. No, they are simply experiences that the real I, consciousness, eternal, ever exploring consciousness, is having. But if you are aware that you are consciousness, an expression of all that is, has been, and ever can be, and that you and you and you, who I perceive in the five sense realm as an enemy, are actually an expression of the same consciousness but having a different experience, then it's that the potential for divide and rule and setting the population at war with itself is tiny compared with what it is now, if you believe in the human label version of I. And so they work constantly to keep us in a perception of self-identity that is minute. And if your focus of attention is there, you're losing the influence of other levels of yourself, other levels of your consciousness that can give you a panoramic view of what is happening rather than just a myopic view. And, you know, when people talk about the awakening, it's not just awakening to the manipulation of the five sense world, which is what we're talking about. It's awakening from the prison cell of the five senses. So you know that the five senses is the way that we interact with this reality, but it's not the totality of the I. The totality of the I is infinite. And when you re-self-identify the I in those terms, your sense of self expands from I am, you know, Bill driving a bus to I am consciousness having that experience. And as you expand your sense of self-identity, so you're expanding your awareness, your connection out into the greater reality, the greater consciousness, where information, insight, knowledge, knowing exists that can allow you to see this world in completely different terms to how that sees the world. So in terms of those two groups I talked about, the unquestioning acquiescence comes from that. Because from that comes, I'm just little me, I have no power, what do I know? Authority knows best. And from this perspective, it's, I don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it because I'm frightened of not doing it. Because if you focus only on the labels of a human life, which you perceive to be the true I, the entirety of the I, then you get lost and imprisoned by something called consequences, fear of consequences. If I do this, what will happen to me? But when you're coming from this point of view, well, that is irrelevant to you. Because you are all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an eternal journey of exploring forever. And thus what happens in a brief sojourn in a tiny band of frequency called the human world becomes, it enters the realms of irrelevance. Because what this will always do is what it knows to be right. I'm going to do what I know to be right. You did what you knew to be right, and overcame the fear of the consequences of doing what you know to be right. And when you do that, okay, the challenges happen, but you are the ones that are going to make the difference, because you are not complying with the system and the five sense prison cell that enslaves the minds of so many. And it's these people, these real renegades, that say, I'm going to do what I know to be right, and I'm not even going to think about consequences, because consequences are a prison cell. If you think, what do I need to do? What's the right thing to do? And then you start listing consequences for you of doing it, you'll reach a point in that list where you'll say, oh, well, I'd like to do it, but not if that's going to happen, thank you. Whereas this level of awareness, which anyone can move into, is just a choice anytime they want to make it, will say, well, the consequences are irrelevant. I'm on an infinite, eternal journey of exploring forever, all possibility, all realities. So what happens to me in a little sojourn called human is irrelevant. I'm going to do what I know to be right. And think about that. If enough people did that, this would be over. It'd be over.
Yes, you're right. So when I listen to you, I always have to think of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Do you know him personally?
Say again?
Do you know, when I listen to your speech now, I was reminded to one of my favorite BBC series. It was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. And I'm wondering if you might have talked to him, because a lot of the philosophy inside of the book, The Hitchhiker's Guide, in this complete series, is also very close to the things you mention here about the universe, about mankind, about who I am, where do I come from, and what is my purpose in life. And I just realized this must be the way when I would have interviewed Douglas Adams, this would be very similar to this. And I love it. So it's my absolute favorite series. So.
Yeah, I've not met anybody involved in that. And that's an interesting point you raise, because if I was the only person saying this, and I was the only person throughout human history that was saying this, then I'd say, well, why is it only me? But it's not. If you go back into ancient cultures, it's a universal theme that we are consciousness and we are having a human experience. I mean, there are different versions of it. There's the reincarnation version and all that, but it's a common theme. And what's kind of jumped on that, and if you look at the background to how what we call modern science emerged, the usual suspects were behind it. And what it's done, all the Darwinism stuff, genetics is everything. When genetics is just the vehicle that we use to experience this reality, you see that what modern science did, and the people now pushing the cutting edge in quantum physics and such like are now challenging that, but it's still basically the foundations of it, mentality, are the same as when it emerged, which was to remove the idea of out there, remove the idea of, quote, God in whatever form you perceive that, and replace it with a mechanical world where you come in as a cosmic accident and then you disappear into nothingness at the end. And what that has done has created in the people that believe that a rather meaningless life. And if you do believe that we have 70 years and 10, to use the biblical phrase, and then that's it, you were nothing before and you're nothing afterwards, then what's the problem about doing horrific things in between? Because it's all a cosmic accident anyway. But once you start to realize that we're part of a massive single whole, and thus we are expressions of each other, then the way you live your life and the way you treat other people takes on a completely different perspective. And so what they did with the emergence of what they call modern science, and I'm not saying it, every aspect of it is to be deplored. No. But I'm saying that the thrust of it was to take God or infinity out of the question, out of the equation. And that's had massive impacts. And now we're starting to push back on that. And a lot of scientists are starting to push back on that as well, thank goodness.
So we talked about reincarnation. Are you afraid of death? And what do you think about reincarnation? Have you been here before, maybe?
Well, that's a very interesting question for me, because my latest book is called The Trap. And I explore all this in The Trap because, I mean, this is going into some big areas, really. But just after the turn of the millennium, I got this overwhelming feeling that this reality is a simulation. It's like a virtual reality simulation, very much more advanced than the ones we know, but similar in theme.
Like a Matrix.
Matrix. Yeah, exactly that. The Matrix the Matrix movies kind of symbolized it very well. And what I was told in that interaction with the psychic, whose name was Betty Shine, in 1990, was that I was going to be led to knowledge, and at other times, knowledge would be put into my mind. And that absolutely started happening almost from the time I left her home that day. And in the first maybe year or two after that, I would come across information in this synchronistic way, and then I would conclude from that information what I thought was going on. But then there was a shift that's gone on ever since, where I would perceive what a situation was, and then 5 sense information, names, dates, places, people, would come into my life to confirm the original, if you like, intuitive conclusion. So just after the turn of the millennium, I had this overwhelming feeling that we lived in a simulation, and that the limits of this level of the simulation we call the human world was the speed of light. That the speed of light was not the fastest speed possible, nothing like it. It's pedestrian compared with what's possible. We're dealing with all possibility here. But that it was the limit of this this reality, this virtual reality I call the simulation or the matrix. And in April 2021, there was an article in Scientific American in which an academic said that he had concluded that we live in a simulation, and the limit of the simulation is the speed of light. And one of the things I was saying back just after the millennium, and I said this before in the 90s, that what we call the laws of physics are only the laws of this reality. They're not the laws of infinity. And then I started to realize when this simulation thing came in the just after the millennium, that actually the laws of physics as we perceive them are the rules of the simulation. If you are creating a virtual reality game, then who's creating it writes the rules, it writes the limits, it writes how the game works. And I started to equate the laws of physics with that. And then this article came out in April 2021 in which he said, well, I concluded we live in a simulation and the limitations of it are the speed of light. And he said he related the speed of light to processing speed. And he said the same. He said, you can write the rules of a virtual reality game, what we call the laws of physics, but you're still going to be limited by the processing speed that you're limited by. And he said the speed of light is the limit of the processing speed in this reality. And thus, it seems to be, when you're in this reality, there are many ways of looking at it that make you think, well, yeah, the speed of light is the fastest speed, but it's not once you go beyond it. And so many people who've had these things called near-death experiences have described, in fact, they've all described their own way, that when they left the body as consciousness, they entered a realm with a very different, quote, law of physics than the one that we experience. So anyway, when I'm writing The Trap, and again, synchronistically, stuff is coming to my life as usual when I'm writing it, information. I thought, well, hold on a minute. If that's true, then what's going on? And I've been looking at this reincarnation for a long time, going back to the early 1990s. And I've seen enough evidence to convince me that it's true that reincarnation is real. It's almost like you could call it the recycling of consciousness out of one dimension into this one, which then interacts with this reality via the body and the body senses. But I thought, well, a few things here. Number one, for most people, there's a few in the Western world, a fewer now as the thing moves on, but there's a few in the Western world that think, oh yeah, well, I'm having a good time here. Okay, that's fine. But if you look across the world, most people are struggling to survive. Every day is a struggle. Africa, Asia, South America, every day is a struggle to survive. And I thought, well, if reincarnation is real, which I believe it is, and that we have the choice of free will, that's something else I'll come to in a sec, then why the hell would you keep coming back? Why would you? And then I looked at the Eastern religion philosophy of reincarnation, which is that you have to keep coming back to learn lessons to reach a state of enlightenment that you don't have to keep coming back. So I looked at this and I thought, well, according to mainstream science, currently, compared with the projected size of the universe, planet Earth is the equivalent of a billionth of a pinhead. So why would why would you have to keep coming onto a billionth of a pinhead within one universe to learn lessons to reach a point of enlightenment where you don't have to keep coming back to the billionth of a pinhead? It don't make any sense. But what I was starting to put together, and synchronistically information was coming my way, is that actually this simulation, this matrix, is not just about this reality. This is one level of it. There are other levels of it which we call the spirit world. And I'm not talking about infinity beyond this reality. I'm talking about other levels of a simulation, a virtual reality bubble, if you like, beyond which lies infinity. But what is happening is that consciousness is being trapped in a cycle of reincarnation, which it's never planned for people to escape from. And when you look at the two things, one area with the Eastern religion and what I'm talking about, where we connect, is this idea of you have to keep reincarnating to reach a state of enlightenment to be able to not have to reincarnate anymore. But what is enlightenment? It is a state of perception. And again, everything in this reality in the end comes down to frequency. So every time we think, the nature of that thought, whether it's a thought of hatred or a thought of love, or it's an emotion of hatred or it's emotion of love, if it's anxiety, if it's fear, whatever, they generate particular frequencies relating to that emotional and mental state. And the sum total of that is what we call perception. So we have a perceptional field that resonates to a particular band of frequency, the totality of all the thoughts and emotional states. And the idea of this trap is to keep humanity, human consciousness, in this human reality and in these other levels of the simulation, in a level of perception, self-identity, that keeps the frequency within the totality of the simulation in its multiple levels. Because then you can't get out. You're trapped within a frequency field. And then you get into this reincarnation cycle, but it's not reincarnation from infinity into this reality. It's reincarnation from other levels of the simulation into this reality. And so this idea of reaching a state of enlightenment is reaching a state of perception and self-identity, the true I, where you are resonating at a frequency so high that you get out of here when you leave the body. And I look at the world in that sense, and you can see how people are manipulated in this reality alone to be in states of fear and anxiety and hatred and conflict and resentment and regret, which are all low vibrational emotions that hold us in this state, and not into states of love and joy, which are very high frequencies, and take us into a very different frequency state when we are in that emotional mental state. And I did just very briefly, I did when I was researching the trap, read a lot of accounts of people that had been put under levels of hypnosis, etc., and the effort was to take them back to a between human life state and ask them what they were experiencing or what they did experience. And the common themes were very, very compelling of what they said. And I looked at it and I thought, this is just another hierarchy. Beyond the human life level within the simulation is just another hierarchy, another control system. And it's a trap that keeps that keeps us in it. So I would say reincarnation is real, but it's not meant to be. It's an expression of this simulation trap.
Yes, but as far as I understand you, then all bad guys are part of the matrix and they are not controlling the matrix, because otherwise we couldn't harm them, and we harm them. We did a lot of success in the last 2 or 3 years, and we did a lot of progress in waking up people and putting out the evil and showing the truth. So if they're part of the matrix, they wouldn't care, but they care. So they react, like with you, to put out of the whole Schengen space, are very afraid of you. And if you are inside the matrix, they also have to be inside of the matrix. By the way, I have a little hotel in Africa, Tanzania, and you're invited. This is not part of Schengen, so just come to visit me. It would be lovely.
Well, that's not a bad idea. Yeah, well, it's interesting.
So are they part of the matrix, or are they outside the matrix, or what is controlling the matrix? So this is how we play a computer game. You know, in former times, I played a lot of Xbox and things like that. So I'm remembered now, like playing in going from level to level and fighting to find the boss game end theme.
Well, what I found interesting, because all along when I've been researching this and what's happening in the modern world and everything, I've thought, well, this didn't start 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 50 years ago or 100 years ago. So when did it start? And obviously the thought that if it's happening now, then it must be mentioned in ages past, or what we call past. And I found that it was. I looked at different cultures and what they were saying, and ancient legends, accounts, and beliefs. And they were describing again and again how a non-human force that operates outside of five sense reality, which means outside of our ability to see it, that is manipulating human society. And so, people say, well, that's impossible. Why can't we see them? Well, the truth is that this frequency band we call human is so tiny, we can't see almost everything. This is a big penny drop that people don't realize. They think when they look out their eyes, they're seeing everything that exists in that space. They're not. They're seeing a tiny fraction of it. And if something enters what we call visible light, where you can see it, then it appears to appear out of nowhere. And when it goes out of visible light, it appears to disappear into nowhere. And when people have said that, I saw this craft or I saw this entity and it just appeared out of nowhere and then disappeared into nowhere, of course, the reaction from the five sense mind says, that's ridiculous, that's impossible, what have you been drinking? But actually, it's just coming into the reality and leaving the reality. And it appears to appear from nowhere and disappear, but it hasn't. It's just left what you can see. And these different cultures around the world, whether it's the Zulu culture in South Africa, whether it's the Gnostic belief system going way back to ancient Egypt, and whether it's the Aboriginals in Australia, Native Americans, they talk about and the Islamic belief system too, the jinn. It talks about they give different names to the force, obviously, but this is the thing. Get away from the names, look at how they're describing it. And it's basically the same. And so there's a force that is ultimately a state of consciousness that operates outside of this reality, this human reality, and operates in what is called in occult circles, the astral, spiritual occult circles, the astral realm. And, when people say, I talk about other dimensions, they talk about really right out there. And a lot of most of infinite reality is to us right out there, because the frequency band is so different, so much higher than we experience. But these different dimensions, they come in to connect with this one. So this, the lower levels, the lower frequency levels of this so-called astral dimension or lower fourth dimension, compared with this third dimension, if you call it that, actually comes to the point where it's interacting with this reality. It's like bleeds into it. It's able to influence. And if people think of that in terms of the old analog radio system, where you tune the radio to a frequency and you get the dominant radio station, which is symbolic of this reality. But often you would get another station interfering, not to be the dominant one, but to interfere with it so you can hear it as well as the dominant one. Well, in terms of what I'm describing, that's the point where the astral is meeting the this reality, the third dimension, if you want to call it that. And that's where this lower astral dimension, that's where these entities exist that are actually driving the matrix. They're of a frequency nature that they can't enter this reality except for very short periods. But what they've set up is a network, which I call the global code, which imposes the will of these entities upon human society. And so often when I've, so often when I've researched key players in this cult around the world over the last 32, nearly 33 years, Satanism has come up. This lower astral realm, which is the realm of evil and what people call evil, and the darker cult, the cult just means hidden, interact with. They feed off low vibrational human energy. Because when I talked earlier about when you have an emotional state, whatever that emotional or mental state is, it generates a frequency. What they feed off are the low frequencies, because they are themselves low frequency entities. That's why they do what they do. And so they want to keep people in states of fear, anxiety, all these things that I talked about, and states of terror. And as those frequencies are emitted by humans in that perceptual state, they are feeding off them. Because, you feel emotion, but you don't see the frequency that emotion is giving off, because that's beyond the five senses in terms of its frequency. But these entities in this lower astral can connect with that, and they feed off it. When the Morpheus character in the Matrix held up a battery and said the machines have turned humans into one of these, he was describing a very profound truth of what's actually going on. So the keeping us in a low frequency state, all surrounding the base frequency of fear, is not only holding us in a low frequency state so that we don't get out of the matrix, it's also feeding them those frequencies. So these entities have created this matrix. And what is the matrix? What is it? Is it a construct? Not really. It's a construct, if it is a construct, of information. Think of a virtual reality headset. It's feeding information to the five senses. It's feeding to the eyes, it's feeding to the ears, and the most sophisticated ones are feeding to the touch senses with the gloves and everything they wear. And what the virtual reality games are doing is hacking into the five sense decoding system, the very system that decodes this reality. It's hacking into it and overriding it. And this is why you'll see people in a completely empty room with no one there, with a headset on, thrashing around in a panic because of what's being fed to their mind, to their brain. And so what this matrix is a information source. And if you think of this field of information, that I call the field, that which connects all the form that the five senses see, but it can't see the field. We can feel it, but we can't see it. Think of that field of information being overlaid by another field of information. Think of a Wi-Fi field overlaying this field of, if you might call, natural reality. And humans being tapped in to that technologically generated field. Suddenly, it's the equivalent of putting the headset on. And you start to decode a reality that's not actually real, but you perceive it as real, just as people perceive their headset in a virtual reality game to be real. And so I would say this as a explanation of this world. Imagine you are in the womb and you have a headset on, virtual reality headset. You come out of the womb and you meet your parents who have headsets on. Everyone around you's got a headset on. You go to school, the teacher's got a headset on. Everyone else in your class has got a headset on. You go to university, the professors have got a headset on. We then go out into the world of work and everyone's got a headset on. You turn on the television and someone with a headset on says, "Hello, good evening, and welcome. Here is the news." Everyone's got a headset on. What would happen? That the information being fed to the five senses by that headset would be the reality of everyone that has the headset on. But, and this is the whole point, they consciousness beyond the headset, the true I, when people tap into that, it overrides the headset. It overrides the information that you're being fed. So suddenly, those people who are accessing more expanded states of awareness beyond the headset start to see the headset information in a completely different light. They start to see through it. And eventually you say, it's a bloody headset that's feeding me my sense of reality. And so the matrix is a information source. And if you go to the symbolism of the Matrix movies, the Morpheus character and the Neo character and the others outside the Matrix, they entered the Matrix not in their bodies, but through their minds. So they're sitting there, that probe goes in the back of the neck, and it feeds information of the Matrix into their mind, and they enter the Matrix with their mind, and they interact with the Matrix through their mind. And that's what this reality is. We're interacting with it through our mind. And when you expand your awareness beyond the Matrix, then you see what you're dealing with. And that's why they want to keep us in this low frequency state, so that we don't tap into those other levels of reality that can deliver to us what's really going on and where we really are.
So then about three kind of other ones like us who are now in the astrofield, and in the years before 2022, I was somebody who was always believing in the media, I was believing in vaccination, I was believing in whatever. And so I see now my world in a very different way and in a much more relaxed way. I have lost this field of fear, and I'm looking through this. And sometimes ask about what is going on, even if this is a little bit satirical. So the other side is the satanistic kind of people who are doing things I wouldn't believe 3 years ago that they even exist, but it's the truth. There is pedophilia, there is child trafficking, there are all these unbelievable things from crazy guys. And then the third ones, these are the don't cares. And we have to get the don't cares so that we have a chance to fight against the satanistic crew. Is this right?
Yeah, but you know, the the Satanistic truth, which is actually an inversion, it's an inversion of life. It's very symbolic that in the English language, evil is a reverse of the word live. Everything that Satanists do, and this cult does, and these entities do, is an inversion of how things could be and how things are supposed to be. And it's no accident that if you look at satanic symbols, they are inverted symbols. They use the inverted cross, they use the inverted pentagram. It's all inversion. And if you look at the realm that they've created, it's all inverted. We're going to protect you by killing you. We're going to protect your health by destroying it. Everywhere you look, it's in inversion, and it's the way it's supposed to be. You go to be school and university to be educated, but you don't. You go to be programmed, which is the opposite of education. Everything's an inversion. But this frequency, this satanic frequency, if you like, can only prevail if it pulls enough people into its lair, into its frequency lair. That's what it's trying to do. That's what it wants you, why it wants you in fear. It's constantly giving you reasons to fear not surviving, to keep you in a low frequency state. And this is why self-identity is so utterly vital. Because if your self-identity is little me, I have no power, I'm just the 5 sense human labels, then you are in such a low frequency state that you're within the layer that this force controls. But when you self-identify as consciousness, ultimately an infinite state of awareness, having a brief human experience, and these things that happen and the names you're given, the labels you're given are not you, they are your experiences, then this expansion of awareness takes you into frequency realms that this force cannot enter, it cannot touch, it cannot manipulate. It's operating in such a tiny band of frequency. And within that band of frequency, it might seem to have enormous powers of control, but it only has powers of control because it's entrapping its target population in that same frequency, and thus the population is seeing reality in itself in the terms that this force wants them to see themselves and the world, and therefore it can control them. Because you're basically playing in their stadium, but you move out of that in terms of your self-identity, which is crucial. Self-identity. What is the I? Am I that? No. Am I that? Yes. If I live my life as if I'm that, what you've just described is how people feel. They get very much more relaxed about the world because they know it's a brief experience, and we want to put it right, and we'd like to make it a nice experience for everybody rather than such an enormous sinister challenge, satanic challenge. But it's just still a small experience within the infinity of experience. On that basis, you do become more relaxed, and you don't lose your passion for wanting to make a difference, but you don't become, sort of terrified by it. Oh my God, what's going to, oh my God, oh my God. That all keeps you in the lair. If you just redefine your self-identity and live it, that I am having the experience, I'm not the experience, then they lose control over you because they can't interfere with that level of frequency, given the low frequency they operate on.
Very interesting. I see it in the same way. But I want to come back to the beginning of our interview, because there you said something very interesting. You talked about cell phones, and you mentioned that you are not against technology and it can be used to help people with spine injuries or whatever. So this is, something Elon Musk just said a few days ago, that he wants to use his Neuralink implants for people, make them walk again, or to give them back that they can see, blind people. And I am a medical doctor. I'm an otorhinolaryngologist, and I have people with cochlear implant treated all my life. And this is a wonder when you can help to hear and to get the possibility to get an interaction with your community by words, because you can them. And what do you think about this? Because I see the good opinions in this. About Elon Musk.
Well, I have a different view of Elon Musk, and I say, again, you can use technology for good, or you can use it for ill, whether it's a microphone or a notebook or a computer. They're all not negative in themselves. They are able to be used negatively or positively. And if you're going to sell something that has an ulterior motive, then you're not going to reveal it and sell it on the basis of the ulterior motive. You're going to say, this is what can be done in a good way. And, my jury would be out on Elon Musk if that's all that he was saying. And I would say, okay, on all that he was doing. And I would say, okay, well, we'll see how this pans out before we make a judgment. But then I look at this agenda that this global cult has for humanity, and what Musk is doing in all these different areas is ticking box after box after box of what this cult wants to happen. And you don't get, and this is something you can almost say with surety, is that you don't get that rich, at least in theory, that rich, if the cult doesn't want you to do what you're doing. Because the cult owns the financial system. It owns the big investment houses. It owns investment giants like BlackRock with its 10 trillion in investment assets, and State Street and Fidelity Investments, all these massive investment companies, which you will find as major investors in all these major areas that the cult wants to control. You don't attract that investment if they don't want you to do what you're doing, or if you're working against them. So I looked at Elon Musk, and first of all, I look at Tesla. And the agenda that Tesla is involved in is the rollout of electric cars and autonomous driverless cars. And that's about control. It's control on many levels. One, they have to get rid of petrol and diesel vehicles, because you can't have autonomous vehicles that work that way. You need it to be electrical, and you need it to be controlled by a computer. Now, once the car vehicle is controlled by a computer, the computer, which is externally programmed, decides where you can go and where you can't. And the idea of this cult, this great reset of Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, which is the front for this cult, is to stop human mobility. So you can't go anywhere. You are all isolated in different, what you might call sectors, as they called them in the Hunger Games films. And so two things. One, the computer will then decide where you can go and where you can't. You've got a petrol car, diesel car, or whatever, you get in it and you drive it where you want to go. With the computer in control, that's not going to happen anymore. And the other thing is that, and this is where the human-caused climate change hoax just keeps on giving, because that's being justified by that, but it's nothing to do with that, of course. And the other thing is, the idea is not to replace petrol and diesel vehicles with electric vehicles. It's not meant to do that. It's not what's happening. A, because there's not enough resources to replace diesel and petrol cars and vehicles with electrical. The batteries alone, and all the horrors that are happening in Africa with the mining of the materials by little kids. The idea is that, again, because electric vehicles are so unbelievably expensive, that only the few will even have electric vehicles. What we're looking at is not a transition from diesel, petrol to electric, but the disappearance of the ability of the vast majority of the population to have a car, to have a vehicle. And that's why they're creating more and more these, what they call 15-minute communities, where they say everything is going to be available that you need within 15-minute walk or cycle ride. And if you leave the area in a vehicle more times than they say you can, then you start getting fined. And the idea is you don't leave that area at all eventually. So Tesla is serving that agenda and leading that agenda massively, certainly promoting it massively. Then Tesla is also creating micro homes, absolutely tiny homes with virtually no space. And I've been quoting in my books for decades insiders who have said that the plan is that people will live in micro homes and won't be able to live in the home size they do now, because everyone is going to be focused into the urban city areas, and they're going to be kept excluded from the countryside, the areas of the natural world. And this is already starting to happen. I mean, about 2010, we passed the point where most people in the world live in an urban area, and it's gone on higher and higher and higher ever since. And so that's a massively part of the agenda too. Then you have Neuralink, which is connecting computers, artificial intelligence to the human brain. Now, of course, you can do good things with that, with people that have disabilities, but you can do horrific things with it too. It's just how you use it. But like I say, you're not going to sell it on the horrific things. You're going to sell it on the good things. And when someone like him says years ago, AI could be the end of humanity, well, yes, it could, as we know it. But then you don't start a company that just pushes us further down that road. And then the big one in many ways is SpaceX. This technological sub-reality that I've been writing about for decades, which they're planning, which people like Ray Kurzweil at Google call the cloud, which indeed is universally called the cloud now, and also called the smart grid. This is to create a technological field, like a Wi-Fi field, that covers every inch of the planet. And through these, not just through these, but massively through these fake COVID vaccines, they are putting material into the body, nanotechnology, synthetic material, which is self-replicating, that is designed to connect people to the technological sub-reality, this Wi-Fi field. Now, if you're going to generate a field to cover every inch of the planet with 5G, 6G, 7G to come, you're not going to do it with towers. You can do that in urban areas and what have you. Yes, you can, but you're not going to cover everywhere with this cloud. So you have to do that from space. And now we have permission already given, without anybody in the population being asked, for tens of thousands of low orbit satellites to go up to pound 5G, et cetera, at every inch of the planet. And who is leading that? Elon Musk and SpaceX. They're by far the leader. They're putting them up all the time, week after week after week, more and more of these low orbit satellites. It's already reached the point where the astronomical astronomical community is complaining because the night sky is not like it was before because of all these Starlink satellites flying around. And they've seen nothing yet because there's tens of thousands now being given permission to be put up there. So when I look at Elon Musk, I look at him ticking every box of these very foundation areas of this control system as it unfolds. And then I see him buying Twitter and calling himself a free speech absolutist. Well, he's not a free speech absolutist. He's already said through Twitter that he won't be putting me back on Twitter after I was banned in 2020 for telling the truth about COVID. And he's already told Alex Jones in America, in terms of saying it publicly, that he won't be going back on Twitter. So he's not a free speech absolutist. And I asked this question. Fundamental for what we talked about earlier about perception, fundamental to this whole agenda happening is to keep from the public that it is happening. Therefore, you have the censorship getting more and more wild. And when you look at the Silicon Valley corporations, you look at Google, who owns YouTube, and you look at Facebook, they weren't only or aren't only controlled by this cult, they were created by them. You look at the connections that they have in their creation to DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, and to InQtel or IQT, the technological development arm of the CIA. They are creations of the system, creations of the cult. They're not spontaneously created by university students like Zuckerberg. They just front them up. And then you have Twitter before Musk. And all of them were fiercely censoring to protect the official narrative of everything. So you're there. So why would Twitter, in that situation, then not only sell to speech absolutist, free speech absolutist Elon Musk, but when he started to backtrack a bit, at least in public, talking about too many bots and all that stuff, they took out a lawsuit which was going to court to force him to buy Twitter. And he agreed to buy it eventually, just before the court case was due to happen. So here's some questions. Why would Twitter, cult-owned, that was censoring absolutely in line with the cult agenda, suddenly insist that Elon Musk buys it and he becomes this free speech hero? Why? Why would they do that? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And what I say to people all the time is never judge anything just on the basis of what's happening now and what's being said now. If you've researched something so you absolutely know that when this happens, I know what's happening because of that, my research, fine. But when things are happening like these bewildering things relating to cult-owned Twitter selling to Elon Musk, it's not in the moment you need to judge it, like what he's saying and doing now, but where it eventually goes. And I think there's a good chance, I'm not saying this is the only reason, but I think there's a good chance that by saying I'm going to give more free speech to people, you then trigger the European Union is already talking about it, and other government agencies and governments in general saying this free speech is too much. We're going to have to introduce more severe regulations to stop it. And then Musk could say, well, I wanted to have free speech, but look, I've been stopped. But so we need to see where this goes first. But on the face of the background that I've described, and on the basis of Twitter doing everything the cult wanted in terms of censorship and then selling to Elon Musk when they didn't have to, that makes no sense at all. And I'll be interested to see where it goes.
So the question is, will we be able to win this fight? So I think we are making a lot of progress. When you look in the media, we are catching up. So there's a lot of movement from Germany and from my channel. What do you think?
Well, I think we've made fantastic progress. I mean, because I've been doing this for so long, I remember what it was like before. Trying to get anyone to look at this information in 1990 and all the way through the 90s and into the 2000s was very, very difficult. In fact, in the 90s and early 2000s, it was virtually impossible. But it's built up and it's built up because as I've said a long time ago that there's going to come a point where this cult conspiracy has to break the surface where people could see it. Because you can only manipulate under the radar to get things into place for so long. If you're going to transform human society, eventually you've got to transform it in a way that people can see. Otherwise, it's not going to be transformed. So it broke the surface big time with the COVID card being played for many people. But I've been seeing it building since basically since 9/11. It really has started to build more and more. So compared with when I started out, the numbers that are aware that the world's not like they thought it was is absolutely fantastic. So we are making progress, absolutely. And we're entering a very dangerous time for the cult as well, because when people have something to lose, or they think they've got something to lose, they will acquiesce to try to protect what they think they will lose if they don't. But once people are in a situation where they have nothing left to lose, then they will act in ways that they wouldn't otherwise. And we're seeing some of it now in China, where the Chinese people have got nothing left to lose. I mean, look at what's happening. Hundreds of millions of people locked into their homes. They've got nothing left to lose. And therefore, they're doing things that they wouldn't otherwise do. And what's happening in the West is that the manipulation of climate change, justifying the suppression of fossil fuels, the elimination of fossil fuels is what they want, and the manipulated conflict in Ukraine, which is also adding to the cost of energy. And the cost of food going up, the cost of energy means everything goes up, but the cost of food going up, the energy supply of food being dismantled at the same time that Rutte in Holland is wanting to destroy 3,000 farms with what is, in terms of value, the second biggest exporter of food in the world. These things are creating a situation in which people have got nothing left to lose. And so it's a time when a lot of people, I think, as this goes on, are going to move from mentality number 2, I don't want to do it, but I'm frightened of not doing it. They're going to move into the renegade section of, well, what have I got to lose? It can't get any worse than it is, so I'm going for it. So it's a very interesting time coming up because of that and other things. And again, in the end, all it is a choice. Human society, what we call human society, is merely the manifestation of human choice. And if we make different choices, then human society must change, because it's just a manifestation of human choice. And if we choose not to acquiesce, as opposed to choosing to acquiesce, the world is going to change. And the ability of the few to control the many is going to be eroded until it eventually is no more. And so it's in our hands. It's still in our hands. But the key thing is to sort this out and to respond before AI starts getting connected to the human mind in a way that it takes it over. Because then you'll never even have the perception to challenge this, because that thought would never occur. That's where they want to go, and that's why they want to go there. So we are now in a very critical time in the years that follow this, where we are going to make a collective choice between freedom and ongoing technology imposed tyranny. And so it's time to make that choice, and it's time to make it now.
These are very good words to stop our interview here. So we took more of your time than we agreed before, and I'm very thankful for this. But there is one last question, and it's then after this, it's your platform you can use, because you have the last words, and I will not say anything after this, and we will just broadcast it like you will tell it to us. Imagine now at your door at the Isle of Wight there is somebody knocking, and it's a good fairy, and this good fairy is saying to you, David, you have one, I grant you one wish, but you're not supposed to say, I want to have as many wishes as I like, so this is forbidden, but you have one wish, and I will fulfill this wish, I will grant it to you. So I say goodbye. Thank you to David Icke for taking the time at the human, der Mensch, as Bodo meets friends. And you're invited again to Tanzania to visit me. And now it's your time to tell us the wish the fairy will grant you.
What do I wish? I wish that humanity would remember who it really is. It's not the labels of a human life. It's not your name. It's not your income bracket. It's not your sexuality. It's not your race. It's not your religion. It's the consciousness having those experiences. The whole foundation of this conspiracy is to keep us in ignorance of the true I, because the true I would act when it influences our sense of reality and self in very, very different ways to what the five sense isolated perceptual prison cell would do, and how it would behave. That's why they want to keep us detached from it, want to get us to believe in a phantom self of human labels and not the true self of an expression of infinite awareness. And so if the cause of the problem is a fake self-identity, then the answer to the problem, removing the cause, is to realize and remember, that's what it is, remember our true self-identity, that we are an infinite expression of all that is, has been, and ever can be, having a brief human experience. And when we emerge from this simulation trap, we are again free to explore forever, forever, all the dimensions, all the infinite possibilities, everything, eternally. And the remembering of that true I from that realm is what will bring down this fake reality by bringing down and dismantling the fake self-identities that keep us entrapped in the fake reality. It's all fakery. It's not real. It's what we are manipulated to believe is real. And so our minds are entrapped in a fake reality. When our minds tap back in to the true reality, the infinite reality, the fake reality must fall. And we can talk about ways to deal with this and ways to respond to this and what we can do about all this. But in the end, I've just described the foundation of everything. When we remember the true I, the fake I disperses, and with it, the fake reality, which is a figment of the fake identity's mind, must fall. It must disappear. Remember who we are, act upon who we are, behave, do as if we are infinite consciousness and not some limited human. And it all falls apart. How do I know that? Because it's not remembering that has put us in this state. And that's why this cult constantly works 24/7 to stop us remembering and to keep us in the illusion of the fake self. Fakery, illusion, only controls you when you believe it's real. When we realize it's fakery and illusion, it loses its control over us. And at that point, this nonsense, this matrix is over.